A 2025 Empower study found that 62% of everyday millionaires still budget, shop deals, and avoid extravagant lifestyles even after crossing the seven-figure mark. At the same time, nearly half of Americans earning over $100,000 a year report living paycheck to paycheck. Total credit card debt in the United States crossed $1.25 trillion in the first quarter of 2026, with the average household carrying over $9,000 in revolving balances at an average interest rate above 21%. So how is it possible that the people with the most money are the ones spending the least to show it? The answer isn't income. It's a list. A specific, consistent, almost boring list of 12 purchases that the genuinely wealthy refuse to make. And here's what nobody saw coming when researchers started studying this. The list isn't full of luxury items. It's full of things most middle-class Americans buy without thinking. These are the 12 things wealthy people in 2026 refuse to buy to stay rich. Some will surprise you. A few might make you uncomfortable. And the last one might be the one that's actually been costing you the most. Before getting into the list, there's one piece of context that changes how everything reads. The wealthy in America aren't who you think they are. They don't live in the marble-floored mansions on the magazine covers. They don't drive the cars in the dealership commercials. They don't wear what the influencers wear. Research from Dave Ramsey's National Study of Millionaires, which surveyed over 10,000 actual millionaires, found that the most common car driven by millionaires is a Toyota. Honda came in second. Ford came in third. BMW didn't crack the top 5. Mercedes didn't appear on the list at all. Jeff Bezos drove a Honda Accord for years before he was worth $200 billion. Mark Zuckerberg has been spotted in an Acura. Larry Page, the co-founder of Google, drove a Toyota Prius. Warren Buffett still lives in the same house in Omaha that he bought in 1958 for $31,500. What this means is simple. The actually wealthy and the visibly wealthy are two completely different populations. The visibly wealthy are usually broke. The actually wealthy are quietly accumulating while everyone else is performing prosperity. The 12 refusals that follow are how they do it. Number 1. A brand new car off the lot. The average new vehicle transaction price in the United States hit $49,191 in January 2026, according to Kelley Blue Book. Manufacturers' suggested retail prices have topped $50,000 for 10 consecutive months. The average monthly payment on a new car loan reached $767 in the fourth quarter of 2025. Roughly 1 in 5 borrowers is now paying more than $1,000 per month for their vehicle. A new car loses 20 to 30% of its value the moment it leaves the dealer's lot. Over 5 years, that depreciation can reach 60%. The average loan term on new vehicles has stretched to nearly 6 years, which means most Americans are still paying off cars that are worth less than what they owe. Genuinely wealthy people noticed something about this math decades ago. Buying a depreciating asset on credit is the opposite of investing. Every dollar that flows into a car payment is a dollar that can't compound in an index fund for 30 years. So they made a different choice. They buy used vehicles, usually 2 to 3 years old, when somebody else has already absorbed the worst of the depreciation curve. They keep them for 10 to 15 years. They drive them until the wheels almost fall off. The contrast shows up everywhere. A black BMW 7 Series pulling out of a dealership lot represents a $1,000 monthly payment that will never compound. A beige Toyota Camry sitting in the driveway of a paid-off suburban home represents $1 million portfolio nobody can see. One whispers, the other screams. Only one of them buys freedom. Number 2. Extended warranties on electronics and appliances. Walk into any big box store and watch the checkout dance. You buy a laptop, a refrigerator, a television, and within 60 seconds, someone asks if you want the protection plan. The fear pitch is identical every time. What if it breaks? What if something goes wrong? What if you regret not paying the extra $150? Steve Adcock, an early retiree who built his wealth through index fund investing and now writes the Millionaire Habits newsletter, has spent years explaining why he refuses to ever buy one. The math, he points out, is structured to benefit the store, not the buyer. Most extended warranties cost roughly 20% of the product price for what is statistically a 5% chance you'll ever need to use them. Consumer Reports has been running this analysis for decades and reaching the same conclusion. The expected value is negative for the buyer in almost every category. Wealthy people skip the warranty for a simple reason: they self-insure. Instead of paying the store an extra $200 to cover a low-probability event, they keep that money and add it to a household emergency fund that earns interest. When something does break, they pay for the repair out of that fund. When nothing breaks, the money continues compounding. Over a lifetime, this single habit alone can save tens of thousands of dollars. The deeper insight isn't about warranties. It's about how the wealthy think about probability. They run the actual numbers instead of reacting to the fear pitch. They notice that retailers don't push warranties out of generosity. They push them because the warranty itself is one of the most profitable products in the store. Number 3, designer logo clothing and accessories. There's a moment that happens in every shopping mall in America. Someone walks past a Gucci storefront, sees a $500 belt with a recognizable buckle, and feels something. The feeling isn't about the belt. It's about what the belt would communicate. That communication is exactly what the wealthy refuse to pay for. A $50,000 watch tells time exactly as accurately as a $50 Casio. The extra $49,950 buys nothing functional. It buys a signal, a story, a hope that other people will notice and assume something. Sociologist Thorsten Veblen named this concept conspicuous consumption over a century ago, and it remains the single best explanation for why so many high earners stay broke. What actual research keeps finding is that millionaires dress like everyone else. Mark Zuckerberg wears the same gray t-shirt almost every day. Steve Jobs wore a black turtleneck for decades. The wealthy buy quality items occasionally, but they buy them for durability and fit, not for visible logos. They notice that the markup on designer brands often runs 400 to 500% above what equivalent unbranded products cost, and they refuse to fund that gap. The fake rich operate from the opposite psychology. They feel they have everything to prove, so every item becomes a statement. Every accessory becomes evidence. The louder the display, the more desperate the attempt. When every single piece of someone's outfit is designed to signal wealth, the signal becomes noise. It reads as effort, and actual wealth never needs to try. Number 4, lottery tickets and scratch-offs. Americans spent over $108 billion on state lottery products in fiscal year 2024, according to the North American Association of State and Provincial Lotteries. That averages out to roughly $360 per adult per year, though the actual spending is heavily concentrated. Studies consistently find that households earning less than $30,000 annually spend the highest percentage of their income on lottery products. The wealthy, by contrast, almost never buy them. The odds tell the whole story. Powerball jackpot odds are 1 in roughly 292 million. Mega Millions sits at 1 in 302 million. To put that in perspective, a person is more likely to be struck by lightning multiple times in their lifetime than to win either jackpot. Even smaller state games have odds that almost guarantee the buyer loses money over time. Steve Adcock, the same millionaire who refuses extended warranties, has called the lottery a voluntary tax on people who are bad at math. The framing sounds harsh until you run the numbers. Someone who spends $20 per week on lottery tickets, which is below the national average for regular players, spends $1,040 per year. If that same $1,040 were invested into an S&P 500 index fund every year for 30 years, at an average 7% annual return, it would grow to roughly $98,000. The lottery player ends those same 30 years with a stack of worthless paper. The investor ends them with a small fortune. The wealthy notice this asymmetry early. They also notice something deeper. The lottery doesn't sell a chance to win. It sells a 5-day fantasy between purchase and drawing. That fantasy is the product. And the genuinely wealthy don't need to buy fantasies because they're building real ones. Number 5. Timeshares and vacation ownership contracts. This one might be the most aggressively marketed wealth destroyer in modern America. The pitch always sounds reasonable. Lock in your vacations forever. Pay one upfront price, then just maintenance fees, and you'll save thousands on hotels over your lifetime. The brochures show families laughing on white sand beaches. The reality is brutal. According to the American Resort Development Association, the average upfront purchase price for a timeshare reached $24,714 in 2024. Annual maintenance fees average around $1,480 per interval and rise 5 to 7% every single year, often outpacing inflation by a wide margin. Special assessments for renovations land on owners' bills without warning. Exchange fees for switching dates or locations add another $100 to $400 per swap. The truly nightmarish part is the exit. The resale market for timeshares is so saturated that owners regularly list properties for $1 and receive no offers. They can't escape the contract because the developer usually has the right of first refusal. Many owners end up paying companies thousands of dollars just to legally walk away from their own timeshare. The wealthy figured out the trap from the math alone. A family that pays $24,000 up front and another $1,500 per year for 30 years has spent nearly $70,000 on a vacation product they could have replicated with hotel stays at half the cost and 10 times the flexibility. Worse, that $70,000 never had a chance to compound. Invested instead, it would have grown to over $600,000. The pattern shows up everywhere in personal finance. Whenever someone uses the word investment to describe a product that loses value the second you sign the contract, the genuinely wealthy walk away. Number 6. The bigger house every 5 years. This is the trap that catches more high earners than any other purchase on this list. And because it's the strongest example of the underlying principle behind all 12 refusals, it sits in the middle of the video for a reason. The pattern is familiar to anyone who has watched friends and family progress through their 30s and 40s. Someone gets a raise, then buys a bigger house. 2 years later, another raise, then a kitchen remodel. 3 years after that, a move to a better school district, which means another bigger house. By age 50, that person's income has doubled, but so has every line item in their budget. They feel financially stressed despite earning $300,000 a year because their lifestyle absorbed every dollar of the income increase. Researchers call this hedonic adaptation. Each lifestyle upgrade feels exciting for about 90 days, then becomes the new baseline. The bigger house doesn't feel like a luxury anymore. It feels like home. And home now costs $10,000 a month to maintain. The data is staggering. PIMS reported in late 2025 that nearly half of Americans earning over $100,000 per year describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Among households earning over $200,000 annually, more than 1 in 3 say the same. The numbers contradict every assumption about what high income should provide. The genuinely wealthy use what Thomas Stanley, author of The Millionaire Next Door, called the fixed lifestyle principle. When income rises, lifestyle stays flat. The increase goes into investments. Someone earning $65,000 who lives on $55,000 has $10,000 annually to invest. When that income rises to $100,000, but their lifestyle stays at $55,000, suddenly there's $45,000 annually flowing into compound growth. Over 25 years at a 7% return, the difference between a fixed lifestyle high earner and a lifestyle creep high earner can easily exceed $2 million in net worth. The bigger house feels like progress. It's actually the opposite. It's the moment compound growth gets canceled by carrying costs. Number 7. The latest smartphone every year. The annual phone upgrade ritual is one of the most efficiently designed wealth transfers in modern consumer history. Apple releases a new iPhone every September. The marketing tells everyone that the new model has features that change everything. 3 weeks later, the previous model feels suddenly inadequate, even though it worked perfectly fine the day before the announcement. The cost has crept up quietly. The base model iPhone in 2026 starts around $800. Higher tier models push past $1,200. With the typical Apple Care plan, taxes, and accessories, a single upgrade cycle easily costs $1,500 annually for a household with 2 phones. The wealthy almost universally reject this cycle. They use their phones until the batteries no longer hold a charge, or until they stop receiving security updates, which Apple typically continues providing for 5 to 7 years. Warren Buffett famously used a basic flip phone until 2020. Bill Gates has admitted his phone is several years old at any given time. The pattern isn't about being out of touch. It's about recognizing that the year-over-year improvement in smartphone technology has slowed to the point that paying $800 to upgrade from a perfectly functional device makes no mathematical sense. The fake rich follow the upgrade cycle because the phone is a status object. The wealthy treat it as a tool. A tool gets replaced when it stops working, not when a new color drops. Number 8. Bank fees, overdraft charges, and ATM surcharges. Most Americans pay their bank to hold their money. The wealthy pay nothing. This single distinction reveals something important about how each population thinks about every dollar. The numbers from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau show that overdraft and non-sufficient funds fees alone generate billions in annual bank revenue from American consumers. Average overdraft fees still sit around $35 per incident at major banks, despite regulatory pressure to lower them. Monthly maintenance fees on basic checking accounts range from $10 to $25, depending on the bank. Out-of-network ATM fees stack 2 charges together, one from the bank that owns the machine and one from the customer's home bank, often totaling $6 to $8 for a single withdrawal of their own money. The wealthy refuse to pay any of this. They use credit unions and online banks like Ally, Charles Schwab, Capital One 360, and SoFi, which have eliminated almost every fee that traditional banks still collect. They keep enough liquidity in their accounts to never trigger overdrafts. They plan their cash needs so they never need an out-of-network ATM. They treat fees as a tax on inattention, and they refuse to pay it. The deeper habit underneath this is awareness. The wealthy track where every dollar goes. They review statements monthly. They notice the small recurring charges that most people ignore. A $35 overdraft fee, paid quarterly, costs $140 a year. Over a working career, that single fee structure can cost over $5,000 in direct payments and tens of thousands in lost compound growth. $5,000 isn't life-changing money, but the kind of person who pays $5,000 in bank fees over a career is also the kind of person paying for a dozen other small leaks. The leaks compound, the losses don't. Number 9. Cash value and whole life insurance policies. This is the most aggressively marketed wealth destroyer, specifically targeted at high earners, and it almost never appears on things millionaires don't buy lists because the insurance industry has spent decades building positive associations around it. Whole life insurance, also called permanent life insurance or cash value insurance, combines a life insurance policy with what's marketed as a savings or investment component. The pitch sounds compelling. Pay your premiums, get a death benefit, and watch your cash value grow tax-deferred. The salesperson, who is usually compensated through a commission that can equal an entire first-year premium, will explain that this is what wealthy people do to build generational wealth. The actual data tells a very different story. Investment returns inside whole life policies are typically 2 to 4% annually after all fees and costs, which is significantly below what a basic S&P 500 index fund has averaged over the past century. The fees themselves are buried in policy language that most buyers can't decode. Surrender charges in the early years often consume most of the premiums paid. The death benefit is usually significantly smaller than what equivalent term life insurance would provide for a fraction of the cost. What genuinely wealthy people do instead is straightforward. They buy term life insurance, which is dramatically cheaper and provides a much larger death benefit during the years when their family actually needs protection. Then they take the money they would have spent on whole life premiums and invest it directly in low-cost index funds. Over a 30-year horizon, this approach typically produces 2 to 4 times the wealth that whole life insurance would have created, with full liquidity and control. The insurance industry resists this analysis because the whole life product line is one of its most profitable. But the math is consistent across every honest study. Term insurance plus index funds beats whole life insurance in roughly every realistic scenario for the buyer. Number 10. Excessive subscription services. The subscription economy was supposed to make consumption more flexible. Instead, it has quietly become one of the largest hidden expenses in American household budgets, and most people have no idea how much they're actually spending. Research from CNR Research found that the average American spends $219 per month on subscriptions across an average of 8.2 active services. When asked to estimate their own subscription spending, most people guess around $86 per month, which is a 2.5 times underestimate. The streaming side alone has ballooned to where the average household pays for 4.5 video streaming platforms, totaling roughly $69 per month, according to Deloitte's 2025 Digital Media Trends Survey. What pushes the total higher is everything beyond streaming. Cloud storage subscriptions running $10 to $20 per month, software subscriptions from Adobe, Microsoft, and Google, gaming subscriptions to Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, fitness app subscriptions to Peloton, Apple Fitness, and Strava, news and content subscriptions to the New York Times, Washington Post, Substack, and various creator memberships, delivery service subscriptions like DoorDash, DashPass, and Walmart Plus. Each one sounds small. Together, they total over $2,600 per year for the average household. 60% of survey respondents admit they have paid subscriptions going unused each month. About 1 in 5 say they've been charged after forgetting to cancel a free trial. The wealthy treat subscriptions with the same rigor they bring to every other recurring expense. They audit them quarterly. They cancel anything they haven't used in the past month. They share family plans where allowed. They notice that the difference between 3 streaming services and 7 isn't satisfaction, it's drift. $2,600 a year, invested instead of subscribed, becomes roughly $246,000 over 30 years at a 7% return. That's a down payment on a house or a fully funded year of retirement sitting inside the gap between active subscriptions and useful ones. Number 11. Investment opportunities they don't fully understand. This refusal might be the single most important one for protecting wealth once it's been built, and it's the reason genuinely wealthy people often look conservative or even boring to outside observers. The fake rich chase whatever the current narrative is selling. In 2021, it was meme stocks and SPACs. In 2022, it was crypto. In 2023, it was AI penny stocks. In 2024, it was leveraged ETFs and zero-day options. Every cycle produces a new generation of stories about people who got rich quickly, and those stories pull millions of investors into positions they don't fundamentally understand. The losses, when they come, are usually catastrophic because the buyer had no framework for evaluating what they owned. Warren Buffett built a $150 billion fortune by following one principle he calls his circle of competence. He invests only in businesses he understands, in industries he can analyze, with management he can evaluate. When approached about technology investments during the late 90s bubble, he declined repeatedly, even as critics mocked him for missing the boom. He looked stupid for 2 years. Then the bubble burst and he looked like a genius. This isn't about avoiding risk. It's about avoiding the specific kind of risk that comes from not understanding what you own. The wealthy take significant risks, but they take them in domains where they have genuine knowledge. The fake rich take risks in domains they can't even define, then call themselves investors. What this looks like in 2026 is straightforward. The wealthy keep the core of their portfolios in broad market index funds like VTI, VOO, and BND. They might allocate small percentages to areas they've studied deeply, such as real estate in markets they know personally, or individual stocks in industries they work in professionally. They almost never participate in the latest hot trade everyone on social media is celebrating. They miss some upside that way. They also miss every catastrophic loss that wipes out portfolios built on understanding nothing. Number 12, the good opinion of strangers. This is the one that ties the entire list together, and it's why the genuinely wealthy can refuse the previous 11 purchases without feeling deprived. The fake rich optimize every financial decision around how things will look to other people. Will this purchase impress them? Will this signal status? Will the people I want to impress recognize this brand? Every dollar passes through a filter of external perception before it leaves their account. The genuinely wealthy optimize around something entirely different. Does this purchase make sense given my goals? Does this decision move me toward freedom? Does this choice align with what I actually value, not what I want others to think I value? That single mental shift changes everything downstream. The wealthy don't need the new car because they're not buying transportation for strangers to evaluate at red lights. They don't need the designer logo because they're not asking unknown people to assess their financial status from across a coffee shop. They don't need the bigger house because they're not staging their lives for distant relatives. They don't need the latest phone because the only person who has to look at it daily is them. This refusal sounds philosophical, but the financial impact is measurable. Researchers at Empower estimate that the lifestyle inflation tied to seeking external validation costs the average high earner between 25 and 40% of their potential lifetime wealth accumulation. That's the price tag of caring what other people think. Real wealth doesn't need anyone to notice. The compound growth happens quietly in accounts nobody else sees. The financial security shows up as the absence of stress, not the presence of luxury. The freedom expresses itself as options that other people can't even imagine wanting because they've never experienced what it feels like to have them. The fake rich spend their entire lives chasing approval that, even when received, provides nothing lasting. The strangers they're trying to impress will never know their name. The compliments they're hunting will be forgotten by the people giving them within seconds. The status they're projecting will dissolve the moment they're no longer in the room. What's left after a lifetime of that chase is exactly what was true at the beginning: strangers' opinions. The wealthy figured out early that those opinions cost more than anything else they could buy. So when you stack all 12 of these refusals next to each other, a pattern emerges that has almost nothing to do with the individual items. The new cars and designer clothes and timeshares and subscriptions aren't really the lesson. Each of them is a symptom of the same underlying choice. The fake rich are buying signals. The genuinely wealthy are buying time. And time, eventually, becomes the only thing money can actually purchase. Every dollar that goes into a car payment is a dollar that can't compound for 30 years. Every dollar that flows into a designer brand is a dollar that won't appear in the freedom calculation later. Every dollar spent maintaining an image is a dollar subtracted from the portfolio that creates real choices. The math is brutal and consistent across every example on this list. Looking rich is the most expensive thing a person can spend money on, because the cost isn't measured in what's paid, it's measured in what couldn't be built because the money went somewhere else. The good news is that the pattern is reversible at any point. Someone who recognizes the trap at 25 has decades to compound a different choice. Someone who recognizes it at 55 still has time to redirect what's left of the working years toward building something rather than projecting it. The earlier the better, but the principle works at every age. And here's where most people get stuck. Knowing what wealthy people refuse to buy is only half the picture. The other half is understanding what they actually do instead. And that part has nothing to do with stock picking, real estate empires, or complex strategies. It comes down to a handful of basic financial principles that the school system never taught, that the wealthy mostly learned from their families or stumbled into through painful trial and error, and that quietly determine almost everything about how a financial life turns out. If those foundational principles are missing, no amount of income solves the underlying problem. The high-earning doctor making $380,000 a year and the assistant making $38,000 a year end up in roughly the same financial position when neither one understands how money actually works. The income just changes the scale of the leak. That's the part of this conversation that doesn't get talked about enough. The actual starting point of every wealth-building journey isn't a hot stock tip or a side hustle. It's the basic financial literacy that explains why these 12 refusals matter, how compound growth functions, how debt destroys wealth from the inside, and how to read a financial life with clarity instead of confusion. Without that foundation, every other money decision is just guessing. For anyone watching this who has felt that gap, who has earned good money but still can't seem to build anything, who has saved consistently but isn't sure if it's enough, the next video to watch on this channel walks through exactly those foundational principles. It's the financial literacy starting point that every conversation about wealth eventually returns to, because nothing else on the list of refusals makes sense without it. It's what these 12 choices are built on top of. Real wealth whispers. It doesn't need anyone to notice. It exists whether or not anyone else sees it. The 12 things wealthy people refuse to buy are really just 12 different ways of saying the same thing. The goal was never to look rich. The goal was always to actually be free. And the people who understand the difference end up with both.